All right, we're all set.
Kristy.
Awesome. Sorry, my mic was like, I kept having issues. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this amazing conversation we're going to be having about the Flint water crisis. We're going to be meeting with amazing thought leaders who are doing direct work to support the community in these efforts. We have Jasmine Hall and Karen Weaver. Jasmine, I would love if you could start off by introducing yourself and the work that you're doing, especially in the context of this conversation.
Yes. So hi, everyone. I'm Jasmine Hall. I am a Flint native. I'm an auntie and a daughter to many people, or not many people, to people in the city of Flint who were exposed to the water crisis. I'm a lead prevention ambassador in environmental justice Griot through Black Millennials for Flint, as well as an epidemiologist in the city of Flint. Thank you for having me.
Amazing. Thank you for being here. And Karen, I'd love for you to go next and do a quick intro of yourself as well.
Sure. Thank you. I'm glad to be here too with both of you. Thank you for having me here as well. I'm Karen Weaver. Actually, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I've been one for many, many years. I took a little detour and became the mayor of Flint. I was the first female mayor for the city of Flint. And I've just stayed involved. I was, active before I became mayor as far as what's going on in the city of Flint and making a difference. And I'm going to continue to stay in that role and use my voice to talk about injustice where I see it. And so, when you're looking at what's going on with Flint and the water crisis that we're still dealing with in this settlement, it's time to continue to speak up and speak out and educate people about what's going on in Flint. And so that's why I'm here.
That's incredible. And I would love the folks from Black Millennials for Flint to introduce themselves as well. Latricia, if you want to unmute yourself.
Sure. So this is Latricia Adams, and I keep saying that I sound like the whiz this afternoon. I want to provide a platform to our wonderful Flint-based leaders to be able to facilitate this conversation. We are so grateful that we've been able to lend our platform from both a local and national perspective to highlight and amplify the issues surrounding this settlement, which is so deserving of receiving much, much more national attention, but it is not. So hopefully this will help to bring forward a lot more momentum around the messaging around this settlement that is just incredibly unjust and definitely grounded in a lot of environmental racism issues. So thank you all so much.
Awesome. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. And my name is Kristy Drutman. I am the host and founder of Brown Girl Green, which is a podcast and a media series that's focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as creative solutions to the climate crisis. I'm really passionate about uplifting issues, specifically impacting Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities when it comes to environmental crises of our time. And I think Flint is one of the hugest battles of environmental justice happening right now in our country today. And I'm really excited to moderate this conversation. So I want to start off by just giving people context, especially people in the audience today. I'll ask Jasmine this question to start off with. For those who may not be familiar, what is the Flint water crisis and how did it start?
Oh, well, and this is something, Mayor Weaver, feel free to chime in too. But essentially, the Flint water crisis came about, and I'll start at the water switch, but it was actually before that. We have this emergency manager law where basically the residents of the city of Flint had their power taken away, and had a state of Michigan appointed emergency manager come in, decide to switch the water source from using Detroit's water to the Flint River. Everybody knows the Flint River is very dirty. Everybody can think about a dead body that has been found in the Flint River, just awful. And then they did not use corrosion control. And that would have cost, $100 a day to have treated that water, but they didn't. So it corroded the pipes, and lead and other bacteria and pathogens leached into the homes of people in Flint, homes, businesses, things like that. And then instead of, once the state of Michigan found out that, hey, the water is contaminated, people are being harmed, for 18 months, they continued to lie and say, oh, the water is safe, putting out reports and all this, saying, no problem, the water is fine, continue, carry on. And the whole time they're, figuring out how to cover this up. Mayor Weaver, feel free to chime in too.
No, I'm just listening to what you're saying because you're accurate with what you're saying. I was just writing something down because, when you were asking what was the water crisis, one of the things I wrote was the water crisis was really just the tip of the iceberg of what happens when structural racism has been put in place and implemented for year after year after year. And, they were really leaning to do a different form of government in the city of Flint and taking all of our assets. And they were doing that through emergency managers. Some of it was happening when you have people in place that are going to go along with the okie doke anyway. But some of it, when that stopped happening, it was putting emergency managers in Black and brown communities, because that was a law in Michigan, and it happened in Flint, it happened in Detroit, it happened in Benton Harbor, it happened in Pontiac. It was going on. And so assets and resources were being taken from the city. Our voice and our democracy had been taken. And, when the water crisis started, it was funny because our first water issue or challenge was really the cost. Our water rates had been raised illegally, and that was how everything started. We were fighting about that. And then they took our pipe from us, sold it to the county. They were selling off our assets. And it's like Jasmine said, people complained about this for 18 months. I mean, it doesn't take a scientist to know brown waters. There's something wrong with brown water. Yet for 18 months, this was covered up, and that was what they did. And, my question is, how do you change a population's water source and not test the water before you give it to them? I mean, who does that? Says, well, we're going to switch your water source, but we're not going to test the water. And that went on for 18 long months because we had emergency manager after emergency manager. We were in that place for 6 years with emergency managers. And it was a cover up. That was the other thing. And one of the things I always say is Flint wasn't about water and infrastructure. It was about the racism that took place. And the water and the infrastructure were a symptom of that. That was the breaking point where the whole country got to see what was going on with Flint. Because one of the things we knew was a whole lot of places have problems with water. They don't have access to clean water, affordable water. They got bad infrastructure, but it wasn't done to them by their government. And I told people that's what set Flint apart, was this was done to us by people that were put in place to protect and serve us. And like you said, Jasmine, we weren't even worth $100 a day for corrosion control. I mean, that is something. And now they come with this little piddly settlement. And I remember one of the attorneys, when I was listening to them talk, they said, oh, that's a lot of money for people in Flint. Yeah, I guess so. If you think we weren't worth $100 a day, I guess that is a lot of money to you all. And the other thing is, one of the things I've been saying is we always have to have our reality validated by others. I mean, you thank God for scientists, you thank God for the medical community, you thank God that they were tracking this information. They were measuring how much lead and bacteria was in the water. They were looking at the blood lead levels of the infants. But for 18 months, when Flint's saying something's wrong with this brown water and my hair is falling out and my skin is itching and we're noticing differences, something's going on, they had to come and validate our reality. When we said it was based on race, we had to wait for the Michigan Department of, Michigan Department of Civil Rights to come and validate it with their report saying, yes, it was based on race and class. Well, we knew that, just like we knew brown water was bad. And that's what this settlement has been based on. And they want the people to get excited about this much money for this many people. Their math does not add up. And they continue to slap us. I said, they slapped us in the face and kicked us in the behind when they gave us this amount, when this is what we were offered. And they want us to be quiet and go somewhere and sit down and take the crumbs that fall off the table.
And you touched on something really important, because during this 18 months, as residents and as, people in the city of Flint, whether you worked, went to school or whatever, we're seeing this water that is dirty, that is smelling, and we didn't really have a voice. People were, protesting, people were marching in the streets during that 18-month period. And it wasn't until a physician, the privilege that you have to be a physician. Dr. Mona is not even from the city of Flint. She works in Flint, fortunately, and she had to illegally use hospital medical records for her children that she was treating to say, hey, between this time and this time, there was an elevation in their blood lead levels. Even then, the state of Michigan Governor Snyder, they said, oh, she's hysterical. You're a bad scientist. You don't know what you're doing. They're saying her epidemiology is off. No, it wasn't off. And fortunately, after that, it was, published, but she had a press conference shortly after, she had run the numbers to say, hey, this is what we're seeing. There's something going on here. The whole time the state of Michigan is saying nothing is going on. And even after that, they finally started saying like, hey, okay, maybe we're wrong, which is really maybe we're caught. And, they're saying maybe we're wrong, whatever. So maybe stop drinking the water. But this was only in English. So you still have people who speak other languages who were not even told at that point, after 18 months, that the water was not safe to drink, not safe to cook with, not safe to feed to your children. And so this is, 7 years later, now we're continuing to see these injustices, and we're continuing to see, once again, a kind of a cover up as far as this settlement with not being forthcoming, not being fair or just in giving Flint what we deserve.
Yeah, and I mean, Flint is one example of so many Black and brown communities across this country that are essentially getting gaslit, are getting denied their, access to basic human rights, to access to clean water, clean air, and a healthy environment. And we're seeing, time and time again, that communities speak their truth, try to demand for change from their elected officials, which they deserve, and then end up getting, bureaucracy, red tape, and excuses. And, as their children and their families are getting poisoned, it's absolutely, unexcusable. And I think, in some ways, it might have required like the media and these actors that you're saying doing things that are illegal and out of the box, because, the government officials are playing by the rules, are playing by their own rules, not by the ones that, the communities at hand, are needing them to follow. So, thank you for bringing light to that. And, you've already kind of touched on it and I've talked about the settlement, but I just want to, make it really like break it down for the audience listening today. If you could explain just the defendants in the settlement, the amounts that have been contributed, and what the settlement amount is proposed to be, just so, folks that are listening can have that breakdown.
Mm-hmm. You want me to take this one? Okay, I'll start. So essentially this settlement would cover, personal injury, property damage, economic loss, and in theory, payment of water bills, although we'll talk about that a little later and how that's not actually in here. But this settlement would fully, finally, and forever resolve all of the claims once this federal judge, after the 21st of January, decides that it's fair. So this settlement will let the state of Michigan off the hook, adding $600 million to the pot. Mind you, this community is 100,000 plus strong. State of Michigan, 600 million. McLaren, so this hospital system, 20 million. Rowe, which is, I believe, an engineering firm, 1.25 million. And now the city of Flint has joined in as a defendant with 20 million. And I would say bullied in, honestly, not really willingly joining this settlement. But we were told, if the city of Flint did not join this settlement, then residents of the city of Flint would be paying our own lawsuits. So that's the only reason the city is in this settlement, but kind of big picture, it's not great at all.
No, it really isn't. Especially when when you talk about the distribution as well. The way it's set up is just really, really unfair. And while of course, the people that lost a loved one to the water, we recognize they're going to get more than others. We recognize that kids, were really, really damaged here. I don't think that's what we're arguing about. We're really arguing about the amount and the way it's distributed. Because one of the things I've said is they really have not captured very well the amount of people that died as a result of the water crisis. They've talked about the people that died from Legionnaires as a result of the water crisis, but we know a lot of people died from pneumonia. And it was a result of what was going on, the Legionella in the water. We know women had miscarriages and stillbirths. Those are deaths, and they did not count those. And that was a result of the water crisis. We know our special education rates have gone up 50-something% as a result of the kids ingesting this water. And those things aren't being counted. And so when you look at the amount of money that's there, that's not going to help with health care, with those health care costs. For so many people. It's not going to help with the services and supports that so many people need. And some of the things that people will be dealing with have not even manifested themselves because it takes years for certain kinds of illnesses to really come to fruition. But you may see in 5 years, well, we've got X number of the population that now has cancer as a result of the water. You may see in 10 years, X amount that, have gone into renal failure as a result of this water. And those are the things that they're not looking at. And that money is not going to be enough to take care of the people that really need it. And I think that's the bigger issue. How do you say, and I keep saying, let's stop talking about 600 million because the attorneys get their pay. That's a third. So let's talk about 400 million. And I know Jasmine's heard me say it so many times, but when I try to talk about the unfairness in the amount, I do always use the Michigan State analogy and Dr. Nassar. And I've never said, and I'm not saying that those gymnasts that had that were sexually abused should get less. I'm not saying that. Maybe they should get more. But what I'm saying is Michigan State came up off of $500 million. And now attorneys get paid, but that was for between 330 and 340 people. Let me say 500 million for between 330 and 340 people. And we're getting less than that for a whole city. And I'm thinking, where does that math make sense? Who does that make sense to? But it makes sense if we're not worth $100 a day.
Mm-hmm. And you hear, I've looked at news articles and things like that when the settlement was first announced back in August, and you see this big picture breakdown of how much will go to kids, and that's the narrative. It's like, oh, look, this is great. People are getting hundreds of millions of dollars. It's going to kids, and you look within those categories of kids, and that's where you see those disparities. I want to give the big picture breakdown, and then we can keep going.
And Jasmine, tell her what those kids, the documentation that those kids and the adults have to even get it.
Right. Ooh, yes. So just
get into it.
It makes you mad.
First, so 64.5% of what's left after lawyer fees goes to kids 0 to 6, which great, because if we're only considering lead, for example, then we're talking about neurodevelopmental concerns. They should get an overwhelmingly large amount. And we'll talk about those details within, but for kids 7 to 11, they would get 10%. Teens 12 to 18, 5%. Adults would get 15%. If you have proof that you were harmed, 3% is going towards property damage. And adults who don't have proof go into that 3% category. 2% for programmatic relief, and then 0.5% for business economic loss. So I know what your next question is, and we can get into that one, but that's the big picture breakdown, which is only what's being talked about.
Yeah, and I think, people talk about like, oh, well, you might not see the health impacts, which like, first of all, is already like problematic that they're talking about it in that way of like discrediting it. But like, it's very clear, like due to the lead and the chemicals in the water, like the actual like economic loss that people are seeing like right now in the short term, that's very tangible. And the fact that like they're barely getting any compensation for that direct economic loss. So messed up. That's horrible.
Yes.
And why we have done so poorly here in the city of Flint. I mean, and you wonder why we're dying quicker or we're having a more difficult time getting through it. It's because of the water.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, thank you for bringing that up. I think people like that are denying what's happening right now, like struggle to piece those two things together and then like prioritize one thing over another. And they're just like, well, we're giving you something, so why are you even complaining about it? But it's like, it's not making up for the losses that are happening. So it's ridiculous.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, you've kind of like gone into some of the questions we've already like discussed, but I'm just wondering like, specifically with the adult compensation in the settlement, you talked about what kids would be compensated with adult compensation. Like, what are your biggest concerns beyond it being like not enough? Like, are there any other points you wanted to make on that front, on how it's going to impact the community in the long term, not getting sufficient funds to make up for the damage that's been done?
Well, I'll say one of my concerns is just the amount of documentation you have to have to even get anything. I think is very unfair because there's so many times when you go to the doctor and you're not keeping records and you're not getting certain kinds of reports. You go for your visit and you leave. And for us to have to prove that that we have somehow been harmed or damaged. I said, this was documented all across the country and the world that Flint was poisoned by multiple things, lead and bacteria. It was already documented, but then you want me to prove again my reality of what I had to deal with and what I've been through. And I said, I know if we were in St. Clair Shore or someplace, we wouldn't have to do this. We wouldn't have to prove this. First, it wouldn't have happened, and if it did, it would have been fixed. And then it would have, not only would it have been fixed, we'd have had new pipes, we'd have had new in-home plumbing and fixtures and appliances. We wouldn't have to fight for everything we've gotten. I mean, we've had to fight to get the money for pipes. We had to fight the state government. We had to fight the federal government, and we still haven't gotten everything we deserve. So for us to have to document these things, and some of those tests are things we don't even have access to. There are tests, and I know Jasmine can talk more about that you don't have access to those kinds of resources because most of them aren't even done here in Flint anyway, the kind of testing that needs to be done. I'm sorry, go ahead, Jasmine, I'm sorry.
Do you mind if I share my screen? Because I have a few slides. Okay, because I want to jump back to the kids first, and then we can talk about the adults, but let me, so this is the breakdown for kids ages 6 and under. So they would get 64.5%, as I said earlier, and this is before lawyer fees, so about 413 million. But they'll only get 2/3 of that. The lawyer fees haven't been officially decided, but based on what we anticipate based on other class action lawsuits. So in addition to, having been in the city of Flint for 21 or more days, pretty much during that water switch, we have 30 different categories that you can make your claim in. And these are the categories for the kids under 6. So this first one, you would get 2x, and they're not broken down by exactly how much you would get, which is a whole nother problem in and of itself, because they want people to sign on, say, I'll never sue you again in the future, but you don't know how much you're going to get. So this first category, if you had 10 or more micrograms per deciliter as your blood lead level test, which if you didn't have that test before, pretty much during that water switch and shortly after, your blood lead levels will go back down. Mind you, people did not know to get a test during that time because we were told the water was safe. Bone tests, like Mayor Weaver was saying, there are 3 people in the United States who do bone lead tests, and most people don't have access to these people. Another option to get in this 2X category is having a neuropsychological assessment showing severe cognitive deficits. So most kids don't have access to an 8-hour neuropsychological assessment done by both a neuropsychologist and a pediatrician. But that's a whole nother story. So similar to that, this second category, if your blood lead level were slightly lower than that, you would get 1.5x. Keep going down, 1x. But these are the ones, when we get to categories 5 through 7, that really show the injustice. So if you look at category 5 and category 1, that's a 10 times difference. So if you don't have these proofs, you're getting 10 times less. And it's one thing, if that's 1,000 versus 10,000, but it's a completely different thing if that's 10,000 versus $100,000 as your compensation because you don't have quote unquote proof that you were harmed. If you lived here, if you went to school here, if you worked here, if you went to daycare here and you're under 6, you were exposed. You're drinking the water, you're using the water. Even less if you didn't have proof from your home, and 15 parts per billion is too much lead in your water anyway. But if you don't have that proof, you're down to this 0.15x category if you're under 6. And this is the same for kids 6 and under. Let me go to the next one. Kids 7 to 11, it's pretty similar, that grave disparity, 10 or more times difference, depending on whether or not you have this proof. Same for, the teenagers. And teenagers get an even smaller chunk, which, relative to the younger kids, it makes sense. But also, you should not have to prove that you were exposed to this water and like lead and other things in this water to get adequate compensation. Because only very few kids will fit into these categories up here, because where would you get this proof from? And that's like an inequity on top of an inequity, because if you had access to the information about what was going on, you're already, a step ahead of the curve. Now you're getting 10 times more. And so, that's pitting us against one another too, because if you're getting 10 times more, if your documentation is good and it hasn't been deleted, which is a whole nother issue that we're going through with the state of Michigan. But if you're in that, the higher categories, you might not be saying this settlement is unfair. And so now we're in this kind of dilemma, and we're debating one another. But I'm going to keep going to the adult categories, and this is exactly what Mayor Weaver was talking about, and feel free to chime back in. But you look at category 26, for example. If you had a miscarriage before April 30th, 2017, you have to have documentation of either the mother or the fetus's blood lead levels, and they had to be higher than 5 micrograms per deciliter. Who tests a dead fetus? Like, this is absurd. We get up here. So if you were an adult and your blood lead levels or bone lead levels were exceptionally high, you get 2AX, or there's a different letter, but pretty much a 2X. Category 23, you had to have a high blood lead level, and you had to have hypertension, stroke, anemia, or kidney insufficiency. But these have to be documented in your medical records as being caused by the water. Doctors were not saying that these things are being caused by the water, because again, they're listening to the science. That's what you're taught in the health field. Listen to what the scientists are saying. And the scientists are saying the water is safe. The state of Michigan is saying the water is safe. So doctors are not giving people documentation saying that this is caused by the water. And so if you don't have that, for one of these diseases, which are all related to lead, not anything else that was in that water. You're jumping down to this category. And this is only if your doctor said it, again, was caused or exacerbated by the water. So, and you're getting half as much as others. But if you don't have any of those proofs, you're not on this chart at all, as far as this 15% or 96.2 million before lawyer fees. And the majority of adults, the majority of people in Flint are adults. Then you add on, the workers, you add on students, college students. So this adult category would be huge. And people are signing up thinking, oh, I'm going to go into, this category. But if you don't have a medical record saying that the Flint water crisis caused XYZ, whether we're talking rashes, cancer, anything, if you don't have proof from the doctor saying that this caused that, then you're not receiving compensation. Another thing that was brought up during the last conversation we had was this final category, 27B. So this category would basically, it's going to compensate you if you die. It's going to compensate your family if you die from Legionnaire's disease. And there are, I understand probably the rationale for this is, years of life lost. If you're older, you might get less. But people are saying, my family member is worth the same amount as everyone else's. So if you had a death from Legionnaire's, that should be a pretty consistent category. But if you're not able to make any claims in this category at all, you're going into the property damage category, which this is 3%. This is where the majority of adults will fall into. And your household, you get one, and if more people sign up for this, then what would allow $1,000 per household, you're getting less. So it's up to $1,000 per household. And if there's more than one person, they're splitting $1,000. So if you're in a household with 3 or 4 people, your life is worth $250. That's 1 month of a water bill, during the time of the water switch. They're not even compensating people for the amount of money we spent paying for poisoned water. And you have to, of course, have documentation, showing your ownership or that you're leasing the property. Jumping down to these business categories. So if you had owned or earned income from property in the city of Flint, so this is like apartment businesses, people who are landlords, things like that, they're getting up to $5,000 for their properties. So if you have one business that's operating 10 properties and people stopped moving into Flint because you can't trust the water. So you lost so much money, and they'll give you up to $5,000 back. Same for businesses, restaurants, where you're not going to a restaurant if you don't trust the water that they're cooking with. Totally, people are losing so much money, so much revenue, and you have to prove that you lost this. If you have more than one owner in this restaurant, you're splitting $5,000. And mind you, this is 18 plus months. They still haven't recovered. But people are really being ripped off. And this is just not fair, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but I just wanted to really walk through exactly what this looks like, because it's ridiculous. And I can't believe that our elected officials are not speaking up.
Jasmine.
Yes.
That's what I was going to say. You were saying people don't trust the water, but we don't trust that our elected officials have their back, because none of them are speaking up about this for us. And, while I think this was always on my mind, it was when I was looking at the slide that you presented and I'm looking at the categories. One of the things that jumped out at me was, okay, so they have all of these physical conditions listed that have to be documented. What if my condition wasn't one of those? How come nobody's looking at what this has done to me mentally, what this has done to me emotionally? So my mental state being damaged doesn't matter. That's not worth anything. I remember talking to a young lady, and she was just crying because she said she had given her child this water. And, she was making Kool-Aid with it and just using it. And the guilt that this triggered for her, even though she shouldn't have felt guilty, because you're going along with what you're being told by the people you're supposed to be able to trust and believe in. And so she's got this incredible amount of guilt, which leads to a depression, which makes her not be the best mother she can be, which makes her not be able to perform the best at her job. And you have all of these other domino effects. But our mental and our emotional health and well-being doesn't matter. It's not even calculated in there. And that's something that we're going to be dealing with, some of us, forever. Some people some people can navigate through, and it depends on, where they were in this and how the poisoned water impacted them. Some people fare better than others, but some people have more resources than others. But we don't even talk about what this has done to this community, to these people mentally and emotionally, and what's the compensation for that? What's the compensation for that?
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think about my nieces and nephews who were under 5 at the time. I'm 26, so my siblings have kids who are very young, and they have never drank water from the tap. They go, to Atlanta or to DC or somewhere else, and DC is a water crisis too, but they're going to other communities where we have family, and they're scared of the water. That's a problem, and that's something that we like you're saying, we don't see that in the compensation. I talked to some teachers because I've connected with several teachers, and they're talking about the behavioral concerns that are happening, that are spiking. Like kindergartners are getting kicked out of school. I want people to understand what is going on here. And I'm glad that there are a lot of things in the city that are improving, but there are a lot of concerns that we have. And these are not being addressed in this settlement or in any other way.
Wow. Well, that walkthrough was really mind-blowing. It's like ridiculous that is such a small amount for the amount of damage that's been done to your community, and the lack of responsibility is just ridiculous, because it's like you had to fight for like so long for this, and then like this is what they're handing you. Like, that is so ridiculous.
Telling us to be happy.
Right. And we're not supposed to speak up, but we don't have anybody, like I said, we have 2 elected officials, and they're on council speaking up about this. But nobody is really fighting this and saying this isn't fair. And it's not. And it's, and then you threaten the people that you poisoned. If you don't do this, then you all will be responsible. I think I told Jasmine the other day, we were talking, I said, that's like arresting me for indecent exposure and you stole my clothes. I mean, come on. This makes no sense. But this is what's being put in front of us. And we're supposed to take it and be happy and move on. And when you make that comparison of the 500 million for less than 500 people, but you get 400 million for, 100,000 people, where does that make sense? Who does that make sense to? And I've said, I said, it just goes to show that they will shoot us. They will put their knees on our neck. They will poison us with water. It goes on and on and on. And then they'll give you, a piggy bank payment.
And you bring up a good point. And while you were talking, I just did that math. So about $400,000 divided by 100,000 people is a little over. You will get a little if it was split evenly, a little over $4,000 per person. That's absurd,
Right, and you don't even get that, because by the time the people who have lost loved ones get their money, rightfully so, what's left? What will be left? That's what gets divided. What is left by the so we know that they get the most. We know that the kids that do have that documentation get the most, but so you get whatever is left. And it was really interesting, because you remember one of the things they said was, well, you have up until you're until 19 to make a claim. If you're 10 years old right now, by the time you're 19, there's not going to be any money left. There's nothing left. So it's just, and there's so much more that they should be doing. I mean, we keep talking about we don't trust the water. Well, finish changing the pipes. Finish that. Finish with the in-home plumbing. I can have new pipes and great testing water, but if my in-home plumbing has been damaged, if my faucets and fixtures have been messed up and corroded with this lead, I still don't have access to clean water, and I shouldn't have to pay for those things because this was done to us, not by us. So, help us if you want to make us whole, because we all recognize money is not going to make us whole, but it sure can help with a lot of problems that were created. It can certainly help with that. It can give us access to resources, but finish this in-home infrastructure. Do those kinds of things. Some of the other things we talked about, the diet, and you have to have access to fresh fruits and vegetables, and we live in a food desert. Come on, put some grocery stores in these communities so I don't have to worry about how do I get access to fresh fruits and vegetables. Put some grocery stores here. I've already got transportation issues. I shouldn't have to try to drive miles to get to a grocery store when you did this to us. Put some playgrounds around here for these kids to run around and jump and be physically, have physically fit, because we know that's something else that mitigates the lead. Give us some insurance. We talked about, give us insurance that's going to follow us where we go. Put some of these things in place because this is ridiculous. Do something about education and giving us access. Do something economically. One of the things we talked about is we aren't going to let a crisis come through, and when all these jobs come through and we don't benefit from them. I said, we're not going to have that double whammy. We should have access to these jobs that are being created as a result of the water crisis first. We should have those first. That's what's important. I said, we didn't even get through the first public health crisis. And then here comes COVID. Here comes COVID. And you wonder why people in Flint are dying and dropping like flies and having such a hard time getting through this. Well, you poisoned us for 18 months. And we're supposed to be happy with these handouts that we almost had to break your hand to get. So it's something when you really look at what is going on, and really it's so nice to have this conversation. I think when I said, Christy, I was reading about you in environmental justice, because one of the things that happened as a result of this water crisis is we really got to highlight what environmental justice is and what it is not, and how it takes place, and how we're in all these communities where you can't drink your water, you can't breathe your air, don't put a garden over there, your land is contaminated. That dirt, we got dirt issues as a result of same thing that happened with the water. I said, and it just keeps getting covered up. And so it's really an opportunity for us to educate people on so many fronts, but we need to educate them also that this settlement is unfair, it makes no sense, and we need to be shouting it to the ceilings. And those elected need to be helping us fight this fight, saying this is not fair, this is not right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for all of that. I think that's really important. And, I really want to provide the space for you all to really talk about what justice looks like to you. I think you started that off. And, the whole point of this discussion, to get this audience involved, is to talk about hashtag Flint says no, and that's to say no to the settlement. And so I want to know, what are some of the demands that the Flint community has instead? And I know that you've talked about what you envision for justice, which honestly is really beautiful and powerful. And I just want to know what else, if you want to add to that you all are fighting for in this battle.
I know Jasmine has some more things to add to that list.
Yep. So like Mayor Weaver was saying, we need structural changes. We need grocery stores. We need actual clean water, which means they've replaced the pipes in the streets, they've replaced the pipes in the homes, the fixtures, the appliances. We need health care for anyone, regardless of your age, regardless of your income, because they didn't only poison, certain neighborhoods or certain income levels, they poisoned everybody. So regardless of your age, regardless of your income, and if you leave the state of Michigan, that healthcare should follow you. and they should be on the hook for healthcare until we have universal healthcare. Maybe our Michigan legislature will start pushing for it, but whatever, we need healthcare. College, there are at least, there are 16 public universities in the state of Michigan and several community colleges. Let every person who was exposed to this water, as a child or as an adult, have access to free college in the state of Michigan. That would make it so that we're eligible for these jobs. We need more epidemiologists. We're gonna need a lot more doctors, especially kidney doctors and neuropsychologists. So many more. We're gonna need, people in all of these industries. So give people education that can definitely change a life immediately. We need them to give us at least $1.5 billion after lawyer fees. And of course, there's no amount that's going to be perfect, but this is what, people are saying would be a lot better than this $600 million. So, and also pay back, give people their money back for the water bills that we paid for poison. There's no reason people should have the highest water bills in the country and you can't use the water. Give people their money back. And then we need to abolish this emergency manager law. Like, what was it? 2/3 of Black people in the state of Michigan were under emergency management during that time. We should be able to pick who is representing us, and they should actually represent us. That emergency manager law needs to go. I think that was everything that we've listed as explicit demand. We honestly need to just continue following up and stop acting like we did this to ourselves.
Wow. And someone asked in the questions, was Flint ever declared under a state of emergency or is an official disaster?
I declared a state of emergency December 14th of 2015. It was a month after I got into office. I wanted to declare it a disaster, but because of the way the laws are written, we can't. We didn't qualify because it was man-made. Now, man can create a disaster, and they did in Flint. And a man-made disaster can be just as tragic as a natural disaster. But that's the way the law reads. So we were not able to get declared a disaster, just an emergency. And I remember the fight that I had even declaring an emergency. They were like, oh, you're not going to get that much money. You're only going to get $5 million. I said, right now we have no million. Let's take it and see what we get. Oh, don't do that. You're going to make the governor mad. I'm like, we're mad at him. What are you talking about? I wish we could be declared a disaster because it was a disaster. Not only is it a disaster, it was a tragedy that happened here. So that's what it should have been.
Wow. And, I know you talked about it earlier before, but I know you said that some community members are satisfied with this settlement. So I'm just wondering, and I know obviously a lot of people are unsatisfied. So I'm just wondering, how have you all balanced, educating the folks in your community on why it's important that you all say no to the settlement? What have been some of the outreach efforts around that? I'm just curious.
We've had a bit of trouble getting the word out even within the community, because the document, I created these slides because the document is 57 pages long, just for the categories, and there were documents there. Our community, I believe, has an average reading level of 3rd grade, so this information is not out there. You have our mayor, you have our representatives saying, hey, this is a great settlement, sign up, you have options to sign up with this lawyer or that lawyer, not you have an option to opt out. So you're having people listen to those who they voted for or those who they did not vote for but was barely elected, to get information. So we've been using the hashtag Flint Says No, word of mouth. They did a press conference in front of City Hall. We've been doing Facebook Lives and just trying to get the word out however we can. Talking to people from Flint Beat, our one of our local media stations that is the one that's not Republican owned and the one that is actually sharing multiple perspectives. We're reaching out through our media, but we're not getting enough attention on this. And I mean, it's not that everyone who is eligible for the, for larger amounts, not all of them are in the boat of, hey, I'm just going to take mine and forget about the rest of y'all. That population is very small, from what I understand. But most people are screaming, but their voices are not being heard.
And it's hard with everything going on, and that's why I said this has been going under the radar. So social media has really been the best platform that we've had to get this information out, and just doing different kinds of interviews. Because with the pandemic going on, it's hard to get out there, because otherwise you'd be having town hall meetings, you would be going to block clubs, you'd be going to events, you'd be able to reach the people and talk to them and hold big discussions. But this is how we've had to do it. And that's why I said, but it's been helpful because of all of these different ways that we've been, people we've been talking with. I think it's starting to get out there, but it's very difficult, and it's perfect timing, because you've got all this craziness that Trump is doing. You've got the transition with the new administration coming in. You've got people dropping like flies every day across the country because of COVID. So it's an easy time to just keep quiet, push Flint through. And that's why I said, when the dust settles, people will say, well, how come Flint only got that amount of money? Well, we've been trying to get it out, but with all of this other stuff going on, it's been really, really difficult. But it hasn't stopped us. It hasn't stopped us, that's for sure. And I have seen different media outlets kind of reaching out, and these help us so much to get that word out. It really, really does. So that's what we've done. That's what we've done. And that's what we'll keep doing.
Well,
Look, if we fail, it won't be because we didn't try, and it won't be because we didn't show up for the fight. And I'd rather fail and have fought. Okay, I got beat up, but I did show up for the fight. So I think that's important to show people.
Well, thank you. I honestly, both of y'all's passion is like so inspiring and amazing, and I know I'll be sharing it all over my social for sure, and be spreading the word my own way. And I want to know, just as like our final question, now that we've, the audience has heard the demands that you all have for your community in Flint, how can those of us who don't live in Flint or Michigan at all support you all in this fight?
Well, I would say the first thing is to just tell somebody about what's going on. You can use the hashtag Flint Says No. You can use, hashtag Flint Water Crisis, but help us get the word out. Help us get this trending, get, the same attention that was on Flint when at the height of the water crisis. We need that kind of attention now, because this is the other end of the water crisis. I'm really grateful for Black Millennials for Flint, who put together this petition that allows you to, sign it, and it sends an email directly to the judge, to Judge Levy, saying, hey, this settlement is unfair, it's unjust, and it's unreasonable. And if you, go to bit.ly/Flint Says No, bit.ly/Flint Says No, you can sign the petition, share it with 2 or 3 friends, but make sure people start to understand what is wrong with this settlement and why it's not fair. If people have contacts to national media outlets, we would love to be in touch, because we really need to get this out there.
I would just have to ditto what you said. Just help us keep this story out, because it shouldn't go away. And that was one of the things I always told people, is pay attention to Flint, because, just like I said in the beginning, Flint's not about water, and it's not about infrastructure. Pay attention to how Flint is treated. So any way to help us keep this story out there, because it shouldn't go away. This is a story that does not need to go away. So through social media and like Jasmine said, signing that petition and telling people, just getting this word out that there are still issues with Flint going on. And it is really, really helpful. It really has been.
And you can reach out to the judge. You can reach out to
Yeah.
Dr. Whitmer, who promised us she would fight for us. Reach out to our Attorney General, Dana Nassel, but let them know, hey, we see what y'all are doing, and this is not fair. I mean, the judge, you know, she's in another category, but you know, to our elected officials, to our leaders, we see this broken promise. We see how you know, Flint is being treated, which sets a precedent for other communities who may go through this same thing. Because who's to say that, you know, another Black or brown community won't have an issue of environmental justice that is man-made by their government? And look at what this precedent says.
Wow. Thank you all so much. I've learned so much, even more than I thought I knew about this whole issue. And I really appreciate you all taking the time and expressing how important this is. And I encourage everyone who's watching this to take action today, to not just let this fall to the wayside of, you know, more information and media cycles. Like, this community is being impacted right now and they need your help. So thank you so much. Again, I'm Kristy Drutman with Brown Girl Green. I was so happy to partner with Black Millennials for Flint on this amazing event. And please check out bit.ly/Flint Says No and use the hashtag Flint Says No on social media. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you to Black Millennials for Flint as well. I appreciate it. That's right.
Take
Thanks,
care.
everyone.
Okay, bye.
Bye.